The digital space, we have got you covered. I'm Pauline Verzosa, and welcome to Morning Matters. All right, but first of all, belated happy birthday, Angela.
Thank you so much. Of course, we thank the Lord for the gift of life all the time, di ba? If you will ask me, I know, wala talaga eh. You're going to ask me, no? I was able to rest over the weekend. I was with my family and then rest, so greatest gift of all. So, yun.
Angela is 22 years old.
25 na.
25.
Wow.
No, that's good. But happy birthday
Yes, thank
to you. And
How about your weekend?
our weekend, Cheska had a good weekend.
I had an exhausting weekend.
It's not good pala.
Too many things going on. But our Denise Tan,
Yes.
we had a bridal shower for her.
Oh,
Congratulations.
nako. We're gonna leave the secrets
That
so wholesome.
that
to
party.
you guys.
It's very, very wholesome.
But of course, over the weekend is also the celebration of Pride Month, diba?
Oh,
Yung
yes.
laban
Oo,
in
correct.
Quezon City. So a lot of people were there to participate in Quezon City.
I think we can all agree that the weekend was bitin.
Oo.
Diba? Yun yung sinasabi natin lagi. Ay, Monday na ulit. No, but we have a lot of things to talk about. It's another week. It's the second to the last day of June. And we're gonna mark it with a lot of stories today.
Right. So aside from Love Laban over the weekend, religious and civil society groups gathered along EDSA on Saturday for the White Ribbon Movement, calling for reforms and greater accountability from the government. Authorities estimated that around 3,500 people joined the activity, while nearly 10,000 police personnel were deployed to ensure security during the event. The groups pushed for an end to corruption, the elimination of political dynasties, electoral reforms, and other changes in the country's political system. Before the program, a mass was held at the EDSA Shrine led by Kidapawan Bishop Colin Bagaforo. In his homily, Bagaforo said self-centeredness is among the roots of corruption, warning that leaders who put personal interests first may be more likely to abuse power. He added that genuine concern for others should guide public service, saying love for fellow citizens leaves no room for stealing or taking advantage of people.
From the very beginning, sabi namin, imbitado ang lahat. Kaya pinili natin yung white ribbon kasi lahat ng colors, imbitado natin. Yellow, pink, red, green, black, lahat sila imbitado. Lahat ng galit sa kurakot, lahat ng nakikisa sa ating adikain. Let us all unite as Filipinos.
Tawagan namin, dapat Duterte man o Marcos panagutin. Lahat ng sangkot ay dapat managot. Yun ang aming panawagan. Kaya mangyayari lang yun kung magaganap pa ang mas malaking pagkilos ng taong bayan.
So it's a peaceful rally, but a reminder for everyone na we're still watching, we're still waiting for the people to hold accountable, especially dun sa issue ng corruption natin, yung flood control, and other issues like anti-political dynasties, reform for the electoral process. And like what Bayan President Renato Reyes said, this gathering or this protest is neither pro-Marcos or pro-Duterte, kasi dapat, sabi niya, whether whoever or whichever political alliance you are with, dapat lahat yan mananagot because kung may kasalanan, dapat managot. No? Ang isa pa sa mga talagang pinipilit ng mga grupo na ito, and of course yung anti-political dynasty, but for the first time nga in House of Representatives na ipasa yun, but the question remains, diba, sabi nga nila, in our Constitution, nandoon naman bawal ang anti-political dynasty, but yung defining the meaning of political dynasty is really has been a struggle.
Yeah.
Diba? So we'll see what's going to happen because a lot of people are saying watered down yung batas na yun na pinasa ng ng House of Representatives, sinasabi nila it only covers relatives up to the second degree, diba? It allows family members to hold office simultaneously as long as they are in different levels of government. And syempre pagdating sa batas, kailangan meron din version yung kabila, yung Senado. Ang Senado, ilan dun ng mga senador na magkakapatid? It's same position nila.
Four sets, diba?
Exactly. So I don't think makakapasa. We'll see what's going
And
to
this
happen.
anti-political dynasty bill, parang nile-legitimize pa nga daw niya
Yung
yung political
political
dynasty.
dynasty.
Instead of eliminating yung talagang mga pamilya that are dominating our political system. So hopefully the Senate can come up,
Yes,
even if
diba?
Yung sarili nilang interests will be
Ang
put at
hirap
risk
din
there.
kasi dahil most or many of the members of the House of Representatives as well and Senate belong to political dynasty. Diba?
Meanwhile, also in the Constitution is the right to peaceful assembly. And we need to practice this. We need to keep doing this because people tend to forget. So these assemblies, these protests, they're a constant reminder.
Right.
And people show up because we do need to hold people accountable. Our taxes, where do our taxes go? There are so many issues that need to be resolved in the Philippines. But again, peaceful protests.
Speaking of holding people accountable, this is also a reminder for President Bongbong Marcos, who will be holding his
Yes.
fifth State of the Nation address in less than a month, diba? That's already happening on July 27. Last year, he made so many promises, from saying, mahiya naman kayo in the flood control scandal. Titingnan natin kung talaga bang hold accountable na ba itong mga taong to. He also made several promises last year, such as building more classrooms, providing laptops for students, free public Wi-Fi. There's also that 20 peso per kilo bigas, rice, diba? Na-implement na ba talaga yan fully, and not just for the indigent sectors. Ang dami, diba? From education, transportation, yung North-South commuter railway. So we're gonna see what President Marcos will tackle on July 27.
Will report to us.
Because he will be reporting to us. Tayo yung boss
Yes.
din, diba, ng mga government officials natin. So, hopefully may good news dyan. Let's not forget to always hold our leaders accountable, especially when they make all these promises. Kasi baka mamaya blanket statement lang yan, false hope, diba?
Kayo naman, nangako na nga daw. Gusto niyo pa to pa rin?
Ay, ganun ba? Ay, kawawa naman tayo.
Diba?
Kung yan ang
Oo, kaya
standard
talaga tayo
natin.
A lot
Tayo
of
may
things
problem.
can happen naman in a year. So let's see kung ano yung mga... let's go through the recap.
Diba? Oo. Di talaga, maniningil tayo, especially now,
Yes.
mga Pilipino, may resibo na tayo. And we don't forget na now, especially dun sa mga nangyari sa flood control. And especially, it's a good reminder for us, lalo na, hindi pala good reminder, it's a reminder for us, especially kapag umuulan. Diba?
Yeah.
Di ba, makikita mo yung mga bumabang kalsada.
Every year is the reminder.
Oo.
And now in other news, DepEd is tightening school safety measures nationwide after the fatal shooting incident in Tacloban City. Education Secretary Sonny Angara says the agency will roll out handheld metal detectors, stricter visitor checks, bag inspections, more CCTV cameras, and safety audits in public schools. DepEd is also strengthening its anti-bullying and child protection measures, including confidential reporting channels for bullying, violence, cyberbullying, and other threats. The agency will also provide counseling and psychosocial support for affected learners. For its part, the Senate Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality will open an inquiry on July 1st. Senator Risa Ontiveros says the probe will look into the circumstances that led to the death of 3 students. The committee will also examine possible failures linked to grooming, radicalization, and the normalization of violence online. Right, so for this hearing, Senator Risa Ontiveros already invited the developer of the game Gore Box. Diba? Ito yung sinasabing the game that heavily influenced one of the suspects, one of the minors in this incident. But the developer already declined. Sabi niya he won't be participating via Zoom, or even in person because he is based in Germany. All he said was the game is classified as for 18 and above, and they're not intended for minors. So, but Senator Risa here is saying she will still try to ask the developer to come. But you know, there are also differing opinions here. No, there are groups like Scam Watch Pilipinas saying maybe we shouldn't focus on the game itself. There are also other factors here, including the communities these kids participate in, yung mga online communities. I'm not sure exactly. Is that Reddit? Is that Twitch?
Discord,
Yeah,
Twitch.
Discord.
There are so many platforms.
So how does that work? Do they can talk to strangers? They can talk about anything?
So Discord is probably this generation's Yahoo. No, kasi before we had YM and all that, but Discord now, for gamers especially, because we cannot rely on game chat. Sometimes the quality of audio is terrible, whatever. So that's why they create Discord channels.
Okay.
The problem with that is how many children actually know how to activate privacy settings.
Okay.
Because syempre,
may
gawa lang ng
guidance pa
account.
rin. Yeah.
But this is why parents need to monitor every single
Yeah.
time a child creates an account.
Yeah.
Because with Discord, if you don't use the proper settings, anyone can enter and
That's
start
true.
talking to you.
Oo. I remember kasi Discord somehow helped us in the family
Yes.
during the pandemic, no?
It's a great tool for communication naman talaga.
Especially when Diego had COVID, no?
Yeah.
So we had to, sleep in different rooms. So every night we would talk to Discord and, watch movie together
Yeah.
using
Kasi you
that.
can stream also on
using
Discord.
That, and he also had friends with him before pag wala kami
Yeah.
doon sa Discord. Pero nakasetting nga siya ng sila lang, nobody can come in without that circle.
Yes. So that's also why it starts at home, because it's so easy to lie and say, yes, I am above 18 years old.
Oo, totoo.
But
Totoo
Discord
yun.
is only for 18 and above, or
Supposedly, but
Supposedly.
even Facebook, di ba, dapat 18
Facebook
and
is
above,
supposed
but
to be 18
everybody
and
can
above.
access it
Instagram,
and
like all
create an
these
account.
social media platforms are supposed to be, but
it's alarming because now they talk about violence in these groups, right? They normalize talking about hurting others, and so what happens is kids nowadays become desensitized to, diba, to violent actions, shooting in the games. So there are also proposals now to ban first-person shooting games. Is that what it's called? So I know Cheska here has something. She's a gamer herself,
Yeah.
but maybe there should be conversations about other factors.
Yeah, but plus these online games, some of the perpetrators or predators use this,
Yes.
diba, to get to their praise.
Yeah.
Diba? Hindi alam nung bata na nakikipag-usap na siya, binibigay na niya yung
So,
personal information.
I never got to, I told you this story off air, but I never got to, I remember during the introduction of multiplayer in Call of Duty, first time that there was online play, and I could hear a child, because I turned my mic off, because when people hear a woman in a game,
Oh.
it's either, basta,
May ganun, may
that's
ano pa,
an
oo.
entirely different conversation. But I could hear this child saying, I'm 8 years old, and I go to this school, blah, 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 and I live, and my name is, as soon as I heard him say, my name is, started screaming, stop talking!
Yeah.
Like,
Revealing your identity,
watch your
oo.
children, please. Like, how can you allow your child to play online unsupervised, and God knows who he was talking to and giving sensitive information? Like, it starts at home. That's
So hopefully all these things will be tackled in the inquiry on July 1st.
all right. Moving on to sports. The Philippine Olympic Committee has announced the Alas Pilipinas men's and women's volleyball pools for the Asian Games in Aichi, Nagoya, Japan this September. The Alas Pilipinas women's pool features key players such as Gia de Guzman, Angel Canino, Ea Laure, Bella Belen, Thea Gagate, and Alyssa Solomon. The men's pool includes Brian Bagunas, Mark Espejo, Jude Garcia, Josh Ibanez, and O Retamar, who will spearhead the team's campaign. The POC also confirmed the return of Italian coach Angiolino Frigoni for the men's team and Japanese coach Takayuki Minowa for the women's squad. Okay, so for the coaches, in case Takayuki Minowa sounds familiar, that's because he is the husband
Oo nga, nakikita
of
ko
our very own Jaja Santiago.
Yes. Oo nga.
Yes. So he also actually handled the Alas girls team back in 2024. And for both Minoa and Frigoni, their head coaching appointments take effect July 1 and expires October 15. So the Asian Games will be from September 16 to October 3 naman. But also, why is the POC being the one to announce? Because the FIVB suspended the PNBF. This is still ongoing. This is due to the serious governance concerns, issues related to athlete welfare. Marami pa. But that's why it's the POC that's handling this for now.
In sports industry, how significant is Asian Games when it comes to
Oh
volleyball?
gosh, that's well. So there's the SEA Games, the region, and then Asian Games, and then Olympics, or depending on where you are in the world. But the Asian Games is a huge deal, and it also, serves as preparation for the Olympics.
For the Olympics, yeah. It's a
Yes.
step higher
Yes.
than the Southeast Asian Games, being that it's continental. And if you win a gold medal there, it's a huge deal for our Filipino athletes.
Go Pinoy!
All right, don't go Pinoy.
Go Pinoy.
Di mo na go Philippines.
Go Pinoy.
No, go away. Morning Matters will be back after a short break.
Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. Now for the latest in the weather, Pagasa is monitoring a new low-pressure area. It was last spotted 495 kilometers east of Surigao City in Surigao del Norte. The chance of the LPA becoming a tropical cyclone remains slim as of the moment. But it's already bringing rains over Visayas, Bicol Region, Caraga, Quezon, Oriental Mindoro, Marinduque, and Romblon. The rest of the country, including Metro Manila, may also experience rains due to the habagat and localized thunderstorms. Now in other news, a 17-year-old grade 8 student is recovering after he was stabbed by a classmate in Silang, Cavite. Police say the victim was on his way home when the incident happened near the Silang market. The suspect, a 15-year-old grade 8 student, allegedly ran away after the stabbing but was later caught by barangay watchmen. Authorities also recovered the knife allegedly used in the attack. Investigators are looking into bullying as a possible motive.
Last year pa daw, nung grade 7 sila, nabubuli na siya, itong biktima. Nagtitimpilan daw si suspect, sinumbong niya sa nanay niya na siya ay nabubuli. Kaya lang, binaliwala ng kanyang nanay, so nakimkim na yung galit siguro.
The House prosecution team rejected Vice President Sara Duterte's claim that her alleged threat against President Bongbong Marcos was protected by freedom of speech. There are more details in this report.
The answer that they have provided to the court is just the same rehash claim that, everything is void because from the very beginning they questioned the constitutionality in the process by which the impeachment was initiated and brought to the Senate.
That was the statement of House Prosecution spokesperson in Lanao del Sur 1st District Representative Zia Alonto Adjong on Vice President Sara Duterte's response to the impeachment articles filed against her. In her 51-page answer, the Vice President insisted that the impeachment articles are void or invalid, claiming that the proceedings of the House Committee on Justice were tainted by clear bias. Vice President Sara Duterte also responded to the impeachment articles one by one, including the allegations that she threatened President Bongbong Marcos, First Lady Liza Marcos, and former House Speaker Martin Romualdez. The vice president argued that there was no threat, saying she was only responding to a reporter's question regarding the alleged operation against the Duterte family. She also claimed that this was an exercise of her freedom of speech, expressing her opposition to the policies and what she described as the overreach of the Marcos administration. Congressman Adjong rejected this argument.
All lawyers would agree that there's no such thing as absolute freedom. All freedom are also subject to some regulation. One cannot go around the streets accusing anybody of something without the necessary consequence of that action, either verbally or acted upon. I think for someone who has that, who enjoys a certain privileged influence in following, we should also take that into consideration. Na hindi mo po pwedeng hindi bigyan ng seriousness itong threat.
The pre-trial conference ended on Thursday, where the documents from both the prosecution and defense panels were marked and identified as possible evidence for the trial.
So yun po yung ating inaasahan na sana in the course of the trial perhaps, or even before the trial, that can also be accepted. At least, no? Kasi admissibility of the evidence would rely on the court itself. So it would ultimately depend on the court's discretion kung ano po yung i-accept nila, na i-admit nila as evidence.
The BIR box is considered important because it may shed light on allegations of unexplained wealth involving the vice president. The impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte is expected to begin on July 6.
Political strategist Malu Tequia said strategies were already being shown during the pre-trial phase of Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment case. In an interview with One News's Political Beat, Tequia said the mirroring of witnesses between the prosecution and defense could be a strategy to debunk testimonies, challenge credibility, and weaken the evidence presented during the trial. She also linked the impeachment proceedings to succession politics, saying President Bongbong Marcos may be looking at the country's leadership landscape ahead of 2028. Tequia also backed Senator Cheese Escudero as impeachment presiding officer, citing his legal background and experience.
You will see from the outset that there are already strategies being laid out, but they are not discussing it.
What are you sniffing?
Well,
What are you seeing?
even the list of witnesses, di ba sabi, you are mirroring our witnesses, but that's essentially a strategy to debunk and assail. I mean, imagine if you're going to present former Senator Trillanes and Mr. Madriaga, and that they will also be the witnesses of the defense. It's essentially to assail them. So you have to stand on what you swore in terms of the affidavit, and that was used by the prosecution. So this is interesting because sparks were made on the first day. Sparks continued on the way they appreciated the documents, and then the questioning of the witnesses, the fact that there are general and vague witnesses. So those are already tactics being laid out, and to be fair, the House appears to be very prepared with their introduction, video and the pressers almost periodically, whereas the defense chose to remain quiet. Logically, because they should
They
not
are on
be
the
able.
defense,
Yes,
yeah.
they
They
should
are
not
on the
be able to
defense.
say
Oh.
the plans. I would go with Senator Escudero.
Because
Because he's a lawyer. What is very, very important in the impeachment, as we've seen in previews, the presiding officer has to rule on the spot. He has to break the impasse. He has to call you out of order. He has to say, in so many years ago, this is the decision, blah, blah, blah. That is jurisprudence. Unfortunately, Senator Win does not have that depth in terms of jurisprudence and law. He might be very good in numbers, very good in,
The
a
budget.
policy wonk. But when it comes to impeachment, you really need a lawyer there.
And now in sports, Alex Ayala will compete in Wimbledon women's doubles next week. The Filipina tennis star will team up with Czech player Nikola Bartunkova. They will face Latvia's Yelena Ostapenko and American Sofia Kenin in the first round. Ayala and Bartunkova recently faced each other in the WTA 125 Birmingham final, where Ayala won the title. The two also played together in Birmingham doubles, but lost in the opening round. In Wimbledon singles, Ayala will begin her campaign against Mexico's Renata Zarazua. And as Pride Month comes to a close, the LGBTQIA+ community and allies continue to raise their voices for love, acceptance, and equal rights through this year's Pride celebration in UP Diliman. Mobile journalist Daniel Dayao tells us more in this report.
In celebration of Pride Month, members of the LGBTQIA++ community gathered here in UP Diliman and filled the streets with pride and love.
From rainbow flags to creative outfits and loud cheers, thousands of members of the LGBTQIA++ community and their allies celebrated this year's Love Laban Pride Festival, spreading love while continuing their call for equality.
Nakaka-excite and nakakatuwa kasi ito yung inaabang natin na once in a year opportunity para sa community na magsama-sama. I think isa lang naman po ang boses naming lahat at ito ay pantay na karapatan para sa lahat. Regardless of your gender, identity, expression, size, and status.
We're here po kasi we want to show our support sa event na binigay ng QC para sa community. You should experience na pumunta dito kasi makikita mo yung pagiging full potential ng pagiging bakla.
Beyond the celebration, the whole day event featured 4 performance stages, Pride Villages, and the main highlight, Pride March, where thousands of members rallied for love, acceptance, and inclusion.
Masaya po na tayo, nagtipon-tipon tayo dito para ipakita natin yung mga advocacy natin para ipaglaban ang LGBTQ. Sana po makapasa po ang SOGI bill para maging pantay-pantay ang mga LGBTQ sa mga batas na nakukuha natin.
Spearheading the event, Quezon City Mayor Joy Belmonte highlighted the city's commitment to providing a safe space and promoting equal rights for all.
This Pride March is a protest, a celebration, lahat-lahat na. Pero ang importante, magkaisa tayo dito, ipakita natin na dito sa Pilipinas at syempre sa Quezon City in particular, lahat ng tao pantay-pantay ang turing at ipaglalaban natin ang karapatan ng bawat mamamayan na makatanggap ng serbisyo katulad ng iba, makatanggap ng mga karapatan katulad ng iba, na sila ay maging libre or free, ligtas sa lahat ng uri ng karahasan.
And as Pride Month draws to a close, the message of Love Laban lives on, reminding Filipinos that Pride is not only a celebration, but a continuing call for equal opportunities. Kapatid Mobile Journal Daniel Dayao, we are One News.
And when we return later at 9:30 a.m., sports law professor Attorney Al Agra joins us as we further discuss the case of Rene Baterbonia and Divine Adili. But don't go away because Money Talks with Kathy Yang is up next to get you ahead of the markets. I'm Pauline Verzosa. Stay tuned to One News.
Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Kathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the July after the Civil Aeronautics Board lowered the fuel surcharge for the first half of the month. In an advisory, the agency cut the surcharge to level 9 for July 1 to 15. That's down from level 12 in the second half of June, marking the third straight reduction. Under level 9, passengers may pay between 287 and 839 pesos in fuel surcharges for domestic flights. For international flights, the maximum surcharge is at a little over 7,000 pesos. The new rate is the lowest since the U.S. and Israel launched strikes on Iran end of February, pushing oil prices up and raised the surcharge to as high as level 19. At that time, passengers paid as much as 1,834 pesos for domestic flights and more than 15,000 pesos for fuel surcharge. The latest reduction came as global jet fuel prices eased following signs of improving conditions in the Middle East. The U.S. and Iran reached a preliminary agreement on June 17 that included efforts to restore shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Prices of LPG are set for a major rollback as the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz eases supply pressures. Starting today, June 29, Petrol's Gasul and Fiesta Gas products will be cheaper by 12 pesos per kilo. That translates to about 132 pesos for an 11-kilogram cylinder. Regasco President Arnel T. explains that the contract price from Saudi Aramco has declined by about $200 per metric ton. Shipping costs are already down as traders have found alternative suppliers and shipping routes. Fuel products may also decline tomorrow, Tuesday, between 50 and 80 cents per liter or rise between 120 and 150 pesos per liter. That's according to DOE Oil Industry Management Bureau Chief Rino Abad based on 4 days of trading at the Mine of Platts, Singapore. Final figures will be announced today. Meantime, both the U.S. and Iran have agreed to pause attacks and allow vessels to move freely through the Hormuz Strait. This comes after both countries traded attacks against each other 2 weeks into a ceasefire agreement. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, asserts that his country has the sole authority to manage traffic in the strait. Over the weekend, Tehran struck 2 vessels that crossed through an alternative route which is closer to Oman. That led to retaliatory attacks from the U.S. military. U.S. Central Command says its aircraft struck missile and drone storage locations and coastal radar sites in the city of Sirik. Global oil prices edged up as trading resumes following a weekend of attacks. As of 8:30 a.m. Philippine time, benchmark Brent crude is trading at $73 per barrel, up by 0.5%, and West Texas Intermediate at $69 a barrel, up by 0.75%. The Philippines risks losing ground in the global supply chains unless it addresses high energy costs and governance issues that continue to weigh on investors' sentiment. That is according to UK-based risk intelligence firm Verisk Maplecroft. The firm told Business World the country's high cost of energy remains its biggest infrastructure challenge. It said the situation has worsened following the Strait of Hormuz crisis, which pushed up global oil prices. Verisk Maplecroft also said last year's flood control corruption scandal could deter companies looking to shift their supply chains to the Philippines. Still, the firm identified the Philippines as one of the region's rising stars for supply chains. It cited the country's more open market, competitive labor costs, and young English-fluent workforce. However, it said more renewable energy projects and stronger governance are needed to improve the country's competitiveness. Core inflation in Asian economies has risen significantly, such as in the Philippines. Reason for the Bangko Central's successive rate hikes in a span of 6 weeks. But at what point do additional hikes start to carry uncomfortable growth trade-offs? With us for more, live from Singapore, the senior economist of S&P Global Ratings, Vishrut Rana. It's good seeing you, Vishrut. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Kathy, for having me on the program. It's always a pleasure.
All right, so first, talk to us about the new fault lines in Asia's growth story and where exactly the Philippines stands in that mix as energy stress dominates.
Yeah, that's right. So overall, if we look at the Asia Pacific picture, then we see broadly resilient domestic demand across the region. On the other hand, of course, the external environment remains relatively adverse, particularly on the energy side. But we also see pockets of weakness in global domestic demand. One area of consistent strength is electronics, where the Philippines is also a member of that global electronic supply chain. This sector is really pushing up Asia-Pacific growth quite substantially. So we see this divergence between the tech-oriented economies who are doing really, really well, and we see our forecasts revised higher there. And then in the less tech-oriented economies, more energy-exposed economies, we see downward revisions to growth and a little bit of a slowdown.
Indeed, we do have a bit of electronics in there, but it is offset clearly by the energy shock that we're seeing. For countries like the Philippines, Vishrut, where the energy shock combines with that sharp cut that we've seen in public infrastructure spending following the flood control corruption scandal, just how serious is the risk of a more prolonged, sustained growth downshift?
Yeah, Kathy, that's an interesting point. Indeed, these are the main factors driving our downward revision for growth for the Philippines. We see the infrastructure spending pullback being substantial. We had earlier in the year anticipated an earlier pickup in infrastructure spend, but that looks to be pushed back towards the second half of this year. We see more of a slowdown in private consumption momentum as well. I think so combine these three factors, the private consumption, the public infrastructure spend, as well as the energy shock, are combining to give a relatively adverse year for the Philippines economy. As such, we expect below trend growth for this year. On the other hand, if we look out to the medium term, our outlook still remains quite favorable. There are a number of factors supporting our growth forecasts further down the line. One is, of course, the favorable demographics. Then we talked about how some of the supply chain advantages are there. We see very positive momentum in the special economic zone investment. So we continue to expect private investment to be relatively strong, and we think that some of the tech plays could be happening in the Philippines, which will support the medium-term growth outlook.
Pick up for a moment on private spending, because that's been a cause for concern, trifecta, if you will. I mean, your report already singles out the Philippine economy as having significantly lagged expectations. You're now expecting growth to be at 4.1 this year from 5.8%. So that's the biggest downward revision that S&P's made across the region. What do you think could turn these headwinds to a tailwind for the Philippines, if you're seeing any?
Yeah, that's right. So the reason that we have this sharp revision for the Philippines is the continued weakness in the infrastructure spend, as well as the energy shock, plus, of course, the private consumption slowdown. So those are the three main factors for us. In terms of how that can turn around, we're looking out for some key factors just along those lines. So on the energy side, if we continue to see a moderation in global energy prices and a smoothening of global energy supply chains, that should be favorable for the Philippines economy. Once we start to see resumption of the public infrastructure spending program in the Philippines, that will give a lift to growth. Also, of course, medium-term infrastructure plans for the Philippines remain in place. So that is expected to pick up at some point over the next couple of years. And finally, on the private consumption, private spending plan, I think where we see the possibilities of a turnaround are certainly concentrated for now to special economic zones. We think that broadening out to wider private sector investment will take time as balance sheets gradually repair. So for the moment, it's a very concentrated story. It could broaden out in the future once we get a period of sustained strong growth.
So between now and the fiscal catch-up spend, where do you see the additional hikes starting to reflect growth trade-offs that the Monetary Board might have to think about twice?
It's a very tricky time for the central bank this year, because on the one hand, there is elevated inflation. Of course, Philippines seeing latest inflation print around 6.8%, so significantly higher than the central bank's comfort range, which means that the central bank will likely tighten further. On the other hand, of course, the demand conditions are weak, and they point to lower core inflation in the future, given the shortness in domestic demand. And the central bank has to balance that, has to avoid worsening the growth situation. In our view, we think that modest further tightening is on the cards. We think the Philippines will end calendar 2026 at a 5% interest rate, slightly higher than the current levels. But it is certainly a very tricky balancing task for the Bangko Sentral.
It is a
this year.
tricky balancing act. You're just expecting one more hike to 5%. But in my conversation with Monetary Board member Ben Diokno last Friday, he said that he's not ruling out further increases, not only this year, but maybe also next year. So if rates go higher than 5%, Vishrut, what could that possibly mean for the economy?
So that would have an impact on domestic demand. It's one of the reasons why we currently do not expect significant tightening. In the Philippines, if you look at the roughly the normal inflation level, that's around 3%. So when the interest rate is around 4.5–5%, then the real interest rate, the cost of funds in the economy is very high, right? It's at 2%. So that weighs on domestic demand. It would affect domestic demand adversely. In our view, we think that the neutral rate for the Philippines would be closer to 4.5%, meaning cuts over a forecast horizon rather than hikes. So if we do end up in a situation where monetary policy has to be tighter for longer, then that could affect our domestic demand outlook. It could mean a downward revision in our medium-term growth projection.
But could it also mean that the Philippines would be in stagflation? And where would that place us among our ASEAN peers?
Right. So what we're seeing this year is that, of course, the Philippines has seen faster inflation pickup compared to the rest of ASEAN. The primary reason has been that the fuel price pass-through in the Philippines has been very rapid. Elsewhere in the region, in Asia, we've seen typically fiscal costs being taken to make sure that the fuel price remains the same. So it's a trade-off. In the Philippines, we don't have that. We have inflation numbers picking up very sharply. And of course, we have below trend growth. So in that sense, yes, we have that environment where inflation is high, but growth is below trend. Compared to elsewhere in ASEAN, the picture is slightly different. Mostly because inflation hasn't picked up as quickly across most of the members. Perhaps Vietnam is an exception. Vietnam also seeing pretty high inflation rates. But elsewhere in the region, inflation remains relatively stable. Growth more towards closer to trend rather than above or below trend elsewhere in the region.
And not to forget, the tariffs are still in place. Your report does highlight the U.S. replacing temporary global tariffs with more targeted, longer-lasting measures, including those based on forced labor investigations. Now, how material do you think these are going to be for the Philippines relative to Asian peers, if we talk about the prospective tariffs?
Right. So the Philippines is more, given the Philippines specializes more in services trade rather than goods trade, we think that the impact on the Philippines will be lower compared to some of the goods trading peers. Vietnam, for example, Malaysia, South Korea, Taiwan, all of these places could have a little bit more exposure to tariffs. In the Philippines, we see a little bit less of that. Of course, the risks are still very much present because the Section 301 reviews by the US are underway, which means that there will be potentially new tariffs on certain sectors or certain economies down the line, in addition to the forced labor tariffs that are in consideration at the moment. So there are risks to that story. We think the Philippines has a little bit of shelter. But of course, it is another compounding external risk that is present for us.
Indeed it is. Well, thank you so much for your insights on the risks posed here in the Philippines. Vishrut Rana of S&P Global Ratings live in Singapore. And you're watching Money Talks. Coming up, the country's balance of payments deficit expected to widen further through 2027. And the Bangko Sentral says business sentiment improved in May, while consumer confidence weakened in the second quarter. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Kathy Yang. The country's balance of payments deficit expected to widen further through 2027. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas now sees a $10.7 billion balance of payments deficit this year. That's up from its earlier forecast of $7.8 billion. The BOP shortfall is also seen widening to $11 billion in 2027, up from its previous forecast of $8.5 billion. The BSP said the country's external position will remain under pressure as trade imbalances and tighter financing conditions continue to affect the economy. It also revised its current account forecast, citing weaker import demand and constrained export growth. Meanwhile, the latest Bangko Sentral survey showed business sentiment improved in May, while consumer confidence weakened in the second quarter. The Business Confidence Index rose to negative 25.2 from negative 35.8 a month earlier. The Consumer Confidence Index, meanwhile, fell to negative 42 from negative 15.8. The central bank said results showed business expect stronger consumer spending, better corporate earnings, and lower oil prices. Households, however, expect higher food and fuel prices, a weaker peso, and fewer job opportunities. Meantime, the Bangko Sentral says Philippine banks remain well-positioned to withstand potential shocks. This comes after Fitch Ratings revised its outlook for the Philippine banking sector to deteriorating from neutral, citing weaker economic momentum and the energy shock caused by the Middle East conflicts. Board member Benjamin Diokno warns the Philippines risks losing its investment-grade sovereign credit ratings. In my interview with him on Thought Leaders, he urges government to realign policy with the medium-term expenditure framework. Here's an excerpt of that interview.
I think it's a good idea to assume that there is a risk. So we do the right thing, right? We cannot be complacent and say they will continue to give us this rating, investment grade rating, because the rating agencies are reviewing our activities here, okay? And most activities, we're an English-speaking country, right? They can read exactly what's happening, right? Listen to the TV programs, etc. So they're constantly monitoring what's happening here. And so it is a good idea to assume that we might lose it, okay? And so that we do the right thing.
Did you ever think that that would have been the case during the pandemic? Because we didn't get any cuts in the credit ratings, but the outlooks, only the outlooks. But we've been able to recover, but did that ever come across?
That's one of my major accomplishments as governor, that during the COVID, where I think around 1/3 of the jurisdictions or economies in the world were downgraded or cut we were never cut, right, in our rating. And that's because I was very transparent.
If you compare the oil shock
Mm-hmm.
with the flood control corruption scandal, what is worse?
That's worse.
Which
That's
is worse?
The flood control shock, right? Because it means loss of confidence. So credibility is very important, and also the stoppage in the infrastructure. If you notice, construction, I think, contracted by about 31.5% first quarter. I wouldn't be surprised if it will contract by more than that in the second quarter. And so things are not moving. Things are not moving. So construction has stopped, and that is a major part of our budget. In fact, that was my focus during the Duterte years. Because I look at the numbers, during the last 50 years before Duterte, we were only spending less than 2% for infrastructure as percent of GDP.
I've had a moment to get an update from Joel Consing, the president and CEO himself. He already reported 2 fiscal years of cash remittance to the National Treasury. So that's 75% of the total earnings in those 2 years, for 2 consecutive years, higher than the minimum 50% required for a GOCC. So given just the numbers that you're seeing, what is your assessment of how that's come along 2 years in the making?
I think that Joel is in a better position to answer that. Right? But asking them to declare 75%, they need the money. So why declare 75% dividend? He said mandatory 50. Why not 75%? Why not keep that 75%, 25% and keep investing in infrastructure? There's lots of infrastructure projects that we need to finance, okay, in this country. Okay, I think the next administration will have his or her hands full of projects.
Full interview with MBM Diokno this Thursday, 7 p.m. Philippine time, and on One News and social media channels and thought leaders. Let's take a quick check on the Philippine peso and see how it's opened this Monday. It is a tad weaker, 61.30 to the dollar. Traders expect the peso to stay above the 61 per dollar level, with prospects of an end to the Gulf War still dim. On Friday, the local unit stayed flat at 61.29 against the greenback. And checking in on the markets overseas, U.S. stock futures trading higher amid renewed tensions between Washington and Tehran. The S&P 500 up 1/3%, the Dow 0.2%, and the Nasdaq 0.1%. Asian markets are mixed though this Monday. South Korea's Kospi Index sheds nearly 3%. Japan's Nikkei 225 tumbles 1.6%, and Australia's ASX 200 is down 0.5%. U.S. markets ended a turbulent week in the red, with the Nasdaq down last Friday 0.2%, and both the Dow and the S&P less than 0.1% each. It is the first time since April 2024 that the S&P and the Nasdaq slid throughout a calendar week. Investors are skeptical that AI firms can deliver profits to justify huge spending. Most are also worried that interest rates may remain higher than many had assumed. And developments in the Middle East will continue to test local stocks, with no major catalyst expected to propel a sustained rally. On Friday, the PSEI hung on above 6,000, adding just 1.18 points or 0.02% to settle at 6,072. Jafet Tantiangco of PhilStocks Financial says confidence among investors to place bets in the risky stocks have yet to be restored. He notes that reigniting tensions between warring U.S. and Iran may cause a rebound in oil prices and add new inflationary pressures. FIAP Securities Inc. adds that the PSEI is dealing with a liquidity vacuum ahead of the IPOs of GCash parent Mint and EPLDT's Vitro Inc., posing a risk to the broader secondary market. Meanwhile, the 10-year government bond yields have ticked down to 6.929%. In corporate news, ABS-CBN Corp has denied that UI-led Converge has walked away from its commercial agreement with the network subsidiary Sky Cable. In a disclosure this morning, ABS-CBN says the agreement between Converge and Sky Cable remained, quote, in full force and effect. Since 2024, Sky has been using Converge's Pure Fiber network to improve services to its subscribers. Meantime, NTC will begin collecting 3.77 billion pesos from Now Telecom in line with the Supreme Court's ruling. The figure represents Now Telecom's outstanding supervision and regulation fee liabilities. The NTC will enforce the collection after the Supreme Court denied Now Telecom's motion for reconsideration in an April 2026 resolution. In its 2023 ruling, the SC rejected Now Telecom's argument additional paid-in capital created through its debt-to-equity restructuring should be excluded from the computation of regulatory fees. And Consuni-led Sirawi Palm and Rubber Corp plans to expand its plantation of palm trees from 5,000 hectares to 20,000 hectares over the next 7 years. The expansion will cover plantations in Zamboanga, Negros, Agusan, and Sultan Kudarat. Isidro Consuni says the expansion, which may cost up to 5.25 billion pesos, will help reduce Philippine reliance on imported palm oil. And that is it for Money Talks. I'm Kathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9 a.m. Kapatid, we are One News, your side, all the time. Morning Matters returns at 9:30 a.m. Have a great day ahead.
Good morning mga kapatid, I'm Angela Lagunsad Castro. A sports law professor says hazing is not limited to fraternities or sororities. It may also happen in sports organizations. Attorney Al Agra said on the Republic Act 11053 or the anti-hazing law, hazing covers acts that cause physical or psychological harm as part of initiation, admission, or continuing membership in an organization. This may include varsity teams, professional teams, national sports associations, sports clubs, and community-based groups. But he clarifies that physical or psychological harm alone does not automatically amount to hazing. The harm must be connected to gaining admission to or keeping membership in an organization. With recent incidents putting safe sports in the spotlight, Agra says it is time for the sports community to adopt a safe sports policy and for coaches to commit to a code of ethics and conduct.
And to discuss this, we are joined by sports law professor, Attorney Al Agra himself. Good morning, Attorney. Thanks for joining us here on the program.
Good morning.
Ako ba yung Agra nun?
I think that's you.
Yes, belated happy birthday.
Thank you, Attorney.
And good morning to everyone.
morning.
All right, so we want to pick your brain on this. CIDG.
Not too much.
Not too much.
Okay.
So the CIDG recently recommends filing anti-hazing act charges to the people involved in the drowning incident in Ateneo.
Yes.
So do you agree on the cases filed, or do you think there are other legal cases that is more appropriate?
To the second question, are there other possible cases? Of course, the family could claim damages because of what happened, which is tragic. Number two, pwede pa yung option of another criminal case, which is reckless imprudence resulting in two homicide. Yeah. And the third one, which is now being explored by CIDG, would be the violation of the anti-hazing law. For the reckless imprudence resulting in double homicide and anti-hazing, syempre ang penalty would be kulong. And of course, this will go to court, and the judges will decide whether liable nga or hindi based on the proof. And there are, maraming legal issues cropping up regarding the scope, the breadth of this law, and at some point, baka the Supreme Court will decide whether this particular act is covered or not.
Attorney, so obviously this particular incident was said to be a team-building exercise, training.
Yes.
At what point does it cross over into hazing? What exactly is hazing?
Sige. If I were to, there are 5 important points or elements for the anti-hazing. Number 1, psychological, physical, suffering, injury, or harm. That's very important. And number 2, who would be the victim? So, ang biktima would be neophyte, recruit, applicant, or member. Okay. Third would be sino ang offender. So, kung may biktima, may offender. Offender under the anti-hazing would be an official of the organization, or even an attendee, umattend ka lang, kasama may parusa, or official of the school, or even the school itself. Number 4, ito yung lumalabas na legal issue, yung uri ng samahan. Under the law, it says there, club, organization, group, and fraternities and sororities. No? And lastly, the why, the purpose. Kasi kaya ka may physical harm or psychological harm because you want to recruit. And number 2, member na siya, you want that member, that's a prerequisite to staying as member. So hindi lang makapasok pero manatili being membro. So napakahalaga. Kung kulang ang isa doon, it will not fall under hazing. It might fall under another offense. So halimbawa, physical injury without the purpose of recruitment, then physical injury criminal case yun. Pero kung may kasabay na recruitment or initiation, then papasok sa hazing.
Well, Attorney, as we know, the CIDG recommended filing charges against 11 individuals, including Coach Tab Baldwin. And it's interesting what DILG Secretary John Vic Remulla said. He said this is a conspiracy because several individuals planned out the activity and carried out the activity. But a lot of people are asking, bakit naman kasama po yung mga ball boy, yung mga utility boy?
The student leaders.
And the student managers.
Yeah. Actually, you don't have to prove conspiracy in this case kasi maliwanag ang batas. It enumerates kung sino ang pwedeng liable. Yung kung sino yung nagplano, kung sino yung nag-participate or lumahok, even the school, even the owner of the venue could be liable if the owner knew, he or she knew na merong ganong mangyayari, na hazing. And maliwanag din, there's a separate sentence which says, just by being there, attendee, liable ka na. Ngayon, ang issue is active ka ba dapat or passive attendee? No? Kasi yung issue, nandun ka lang, liable ka na without doing anything. So, pero maliwanag, for just being there, makes you liable.
But I remember kasi, the reason why they included that but just being there, you're liable na because of what happened with Atyo Castillo.
Correct.
Years ago, 'di ba? Kasi may mga fraternity brothers siya doon na hindi ini-stop. 'Di ba yung nangyayari sa kanya, hinayaan siya. But this time around, these are ball boys utility that are just following orders.
Ang problema lang, the law does not make any qualification distinction. Just being there, liable. Walang sinabi na anong level of participation, walang sinabi anong level of accountability. Walang ganun eh. Kaya the law may be harsh, no? Pero right now, yun ang wording ng ating batas eh. Same with the issue ng organization. Does it cover a basketball team? Does it cover a varsity team? Plain language of the law will tell us kahit anong samahan, kahit anong group. Pero some will say, yung varsity team na yun is part of the school and therefore it's not separate from the school and therefore not covered by the anti-hazing law. So ito yung mga legal issues that's cropping up because of this case.
Attorney, with the list of names in the recommendation sent out, all the names there were all people who were present.
Yes.
But is there still, because there are still several other investigations ongoing, is there still a possibility that the school or the management will be held liable?
Yes, possible nga masama would be advisors. Pwedeng masama rin yung ibang, kung sino pang ibang nandun. Pwede rin masama ang school kung hinayaan nila or pinayagan nila or if they approve the training. So, pwede pa madagdagan. So, hindi pa tapos ang investigasyon. There could be, yun lang yung quote-unquote immediate who were there. So, ang tanong, meron bang nagplano? Kasi even those who planned the event, approved the event, maybe also all held liable under the anti-hazing law.
But attorney, could they simply argue that this was a tragic accident? You know, that they didn't intend for this to happen. How important is intent in a case like this? Because I'm sure Coach Tab Baldwin and the rest of the coaching staff didn't want any of their players to die.
Itong batas na ito does not consider intent. The fact na nangyari, assuming yung elements na pinag-usapan natin happened with or without intent, you can be held liable under this special penal law.
And what are the penalties, attorney? Imprisonment? How long are we talking about?
Pinakamalala would be the one who planned and participated and it resulted in death or rape, sodomy, or mutilation. 20 years and 1 day to 40 years imprisonment and 3 million pesos. Kung attendee ka lang, mas mababa, pero medyo mahaba pa rin yung imprisonment, 12 years to 1 month. So medyo mabigat. So may graduated siya depending on the level of your involvement and participation. Kung nagkaroon ng hazing pero wala namang namatay, wala namang na-rape, then mas mababa yung penalty. So sa ngayon, they're looking at the maximum for those who planned and participated because it resulted in 2 deaths.
Well, I want to ask you about the safe sports policy that you have been pushing even before this tragedy happened. No? So, can you tell us more about it?
Siguro, my safe sport policy is anchored on the why of sports. No? I firmly believe that sports is not just for sports, competitions, medals. Ina-advocate ko yung the noble purpose of sports. And the noble purposes of sports are found in our Constitution. No? Not too many lawyers and law students realize that. So healthy and alert citizenry, total human liberation and development, patriotism and nationalism. And I believe that you cannot achieve the why of sports if the environment is unsafe. And when we talk about safety, hindi lang yung walang physical injury. Kailangan proactive in terms of walang bullying, walang hazing, walang bastusan, walang sexist, walang misogynistic, may Safe Spaces Act tayo. Coaches, officials are responsible. Athletes must also be responsible. Kailangan medical, may safety protocols, may clear policies. Kaya nga I recently released this proposed policy for safe sports, and advocating na sana lahat ng samahan sa sports ay to adopt this. And I'm also proposing a code of ethics and conduct for coaches, code of ethics and conduct for officials, kasi lahat ng membro ng community ay may accountability for safe sports.
How far can coaches, you said it has to be a safe space. Again, as parents or as children who want to enter sports, I mean, it's a given that the children under your care cannot be harmed. But
Go ahead, sorry.
so you already had something to say about that.
Ang school, ang coaches, tumatay yung magulang. Loco parentis, meaning in place of the parents. And as the second parents, no, kailangan magulang ang din ang trato natin. And sino ba naman ang magulang na gustong masaktan ang kanilang mga anak? Kaya yun ang responsibility. And therefore, if a parent or a coach or a school official is negligent, then may accountability on the part of the second parent.
Pero Attorney Al, as a sports lawyer and a sports executive yourself, what are your thoughts on this supposed philosophy of Coach Tab Baldwin, where players must be broken down and stripped of their ego, and the best way to do that is to push them to their limits now? Is that justifiable?
I think because of this case, maraming coaches will now take the safer route. And the effect of that taking the safer route, baka we will not be able to push our athletes to quote-unquote the limit so that for them to excel. No? Kasi ako naniniwala sa excellence, pero again, you have to push them to that limit. But very clear under the law, yung limit has a limit. It cannot amount to any crime, such as hazing. Ngayon, napakaliwanag na under this, of course ngayon, nasa media, social media. So mahalagang malaman natin na pag meron palang forced physical activity or brutal treatment, yun naman yung mahalaga for it to amount to hazing. No? Brutal treatment, forced physical activity, it might amount to hazing. Kaya ako, I'm a firm believer in dialogue, consultation with the athletes. It's never one-sided, it's never lopsided. Kailangan meaningful consultation with the athletes. Kasi yung ibang coaches, itong program ko, or hindi pa nga napaliwanag yung program, basta gawin nyo, period. Otherwise,
You're expected to...
babangko kita, or hindi kita tatanggalin kita
Kahit
sa
hindi
team.
naiintindihan.
Kahit hindi naiintindihan, kailangan malaman the athletes must own the program because end of the day, this program is for them.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that, because you also said earlier that you are pushing for code of ethics for the coaches and for the schools. What about athletes' rights? Because, diba, I was wondering if this tragedy have led us, kumbaga, na reveal yung culture of blind obedience.
Correct.
That athletes are expected to obey, diba, without question.
Siguro not just athletes, even students, even employees, no, may ganun the blind obedience. Basta sabi ni boss, sabi ni coach, period, that's law. Hindi na siguro dapat ganun. No, kailangan mahalaga yung consultation, owning, and being responsible. For us in obstacle sports and climbing, we have an agreement with our athletes. And in that agreement, of course, the why of National Sports Association is the athletes. But maliwanag din doon, meron ding responsibilities. Hindi naman puro rights. Hindi puro entitlements or benefits. Meron ding corresponding obligations and responsibilities. And ako, kailangan nasa kontrata. Kaya maraming issue na pwedeng maiwasan if all of these are incorporated in a contract that the athletes should understand, the coaches should understand as well. Kasi merong accountabilities.
Well, attorney, even before signing that contract, even before committing to a school, Because obviously there are parents who want their kids to go to the best schools, to play with the best teams for the best possible future for them. Before committing, what do parents need to ask? Because iisipin nila, magaling yung coach na to, maganda yung team na to, dito ka dapat.
Siguro unang challenge the parents must ask, kasi minsan they don't ask. Pag ni-recruit na sila ng school, then that's it. Kasi yun yung school. And now, I think parents should be proactive, asking what's the program. Now, because of this, ano ba mga protocols, anong safety protocols, may medical certificate, kasi that's one of the requirements for off-site training, medical certificate, and even insurance. So, ngayon, siguro gagawa tayo ng guide for parents, no, what to ask sa isang, hindi lang sa school, pati National Sports Association, pati mga professional leagues. Kasi lahat yan mga atleta. Any club, baka magandang may ganung discussion and nakasulat.
Or attorney, even in the presence of, let's say, a contract or a waiver, is that binding when there are incidents like this na, kuwari, sabihin natin, nagkaroon naman ng parental consent, si Rene or si Divine, or any of the players in this team building activity, does that absolve the team, the coach, the school from any liability?
No. It can absolve you of certain things like foreseeable risk, pero it cannot absolve you from negligence, unsafe practices, untrained professionals, or any offense like the Anti-Hazing Act. Even the Anti-Hazing Act says kahit na may waiver pa si parent regarding hazing, that's a void waiver. At merong tayong mga nangyari na in the past, at meron ng Supreme Court decision, merong minor sumali sa half marathon, nabunggo siya ng jeep, namatay siya. Liable si organizer under that case because unsafe yung route, untrained yung personnel, kahit na pumirma pa ng waiver si minor. So it doesn't cover those unsafe practices.
Kasi yun ang nagiging issue din ngayon eh. What if they sign the waiver na, okay, we're gonna go to this training and whatever liability that the school has, you are waiving that, right?
No, you're not. Again, here, you're not waiving the violation of the anti-hazing law. You're not waiving negligence. You're not waiving unsafe practices.
Eh para saan po yung waiver na yun?
To cover lang, let's say, foreseeable risk. So, for example, boxing. Clearly, you will assume the risk of being hit. Or mass racing. Kahit pa paano merong, or even basketball. Pero hindi mo mafo-foresee when you join a running event na mabubunggo ka ng jeep. No?
Concussion ka.
Hindi mo rin mafo-foresee na mamamatay ka because of training.
Especially when kayo mismo or the coach himself is the one subjecting them to these types of activities, diba? So kailangan, attorney, may due diligence din on their part. If there were rescue teams on standby, ano ba yun? Could that absolve Coach Tab or the team?
Well, unfortunately, wala.
Pa rin, oo.
Balikan lang natin, last year may namatay na women's basketball player. That could have been avoided kung merong AED, yung defibrillator. Wala eh. So, maraming pwedeng these deaths, injuries could be prevented. And what were the protocols, policies, personnel that were employed, that were adopted to prevent these. And again, safe sports.
But maisingit ko lang, taking off from what Pawi said, what about the resort? Do they have accountability or liability in this scenario? Because wala din silang kaagad na responders eh.
The way they were defending themselves, siyempre may mga signages, may mga briefing daw. So we don't know whether those are enough. So meron ba silang medical personnel? So meron ba silang permit from the local government unit? So marami ring kailangang compliance on the part of everyone.
On that note, they also mentioned that the team asked for privacy.
Yes.
How does this come into, like, should they have insisted on at least having someone present from the resort or?
Again, nagkaroon ng gentle persons agreement na wag nyo kaming pakialaman. Pero ang downside of that would be itong nangyaring ito. naghugas kamay, and therefore I'm no longer liable, and therefore bahala kayo. Yung bahala kayo can only go as far, but so again, right now hindi kasama sa liability, pero again, there are 3 possible cases in this scenario: the claim for damages, number 2, itong reckless imprudence, which hindi pa napag-uusapan, wala pang finding, and itong ang anti-hazing. Yeah.
Well, you have long been advocating for the safe sports policy long before the tragedy happened. Do you think that none of this would have happened kung na-adapt kaagad na yung safe sports policy?
Nasa huli ang pagsisisi. The past 10 years, there were 7 related deaths in sports, which I think could have been avoided, or hindi naman siguro sana namatay. So, ilang deaths pa ang hintay natin before we wake up. So this is, I think, a wake-up call for the sports community, for everyone actually, because we're part of this environment.
Well, speaking of a wake-up call, attorney, I'm sure coaches, want their players to be the best, diba? Sabi mo nga, we need to push them to their limits, but in a safe way. Now, taking off from that,
Safe and with consent.
and with consent of the player and their guardians, diba? But how can they do that, attorney? Cite us some examples, because you oversaw a national team that has won gold medals, the obstacle sports national team. Paano nga ba natin ite-train tong mga athletes na to become their best, to see their full potential, but in a safe way?
Again, programs must be in writing. Programs must be explained. Contracts between the association and the athletes. Code of ethics with the coaches. Magandang nasa papel, because if they're reduced in writing, then maliwanag yung boundaries. Maliwanag yung responsibilities and accountabilities. Again, hindi lang coaches, hindi lang officials, but athletes themselves. Kasi athletes can be an offender, like under the Safe Spaces Act, yung bawal ang bastos, misogynistic, transphobic, that also covers athletes. So, hindi lang persons of authority, even your peers.
And in terms of the activities, attorney, dapat ba iwasan na itong mga water-based activities that require them to, where there are dangerous water conditions?
Baka ngayon wala nang pupunta sa beach. Siguro swimming pool, you can achieve the same objective, controlled environment. Kasi maganda rin yung cross-training. We advocate cross-training, engage in other sports. But now,
everybody will,
kaya safety, yun naman eh. And respect, I think those are the 2 core values of this law and all other laws.
Well, athletes are expected to be disciplined, diba? That's why there are a lot of trainings na kailangan nila undergo under their coaches, etc. But how do you strike a balance between being disciplined, mentally tough, against being reckless?
Okay. You're not referring to your kids. No.
Speaking as a mom.
Yun yung fine line eh. Ano yung enough at ano yung sobra. At some point, you're calling for judgment and discretion. Clearly, the laws are there. Anything unsafe. Sa akin, when in doubt, maybe it's unsafe. Kasi when you're doubting, pwede ba to? Or delikado? Maybe wag mo nang gawin. Or pag-aralan pa. Err on the safe side. Correct. Rather than pakiramdam mo na unsafe, gagawin mo pa, then
trust your guts.
Mahirap yung trust your guts. So, kailangan may science and may consultation. I think that's meaningful, ha? Hindi yung one-sided, one lecture na walang open forum, etc. And at some point, I don't know kung if we will require the athletes to sign on the dotted line but of course, even if you sign that agreement, that does not excuse
Yun nga eh, that's what you said.
from unlawful acts, from unsafe, from hazing.
While waiting for bills to be filed, laws to be amended, what are the immediate and realistic changes that athletics departments and organizations can impose now?
adopt a safe sport policy. Right now, I heard there are 2 schools na nagkaroon ng biglang orientation training for coaches. At ang example would be what happened. I know of 2 schools. So, nagte-training ngayon. Adopt a safe sports policy, code of conduct, ethics for coaches, same with athletes, same with officials, constant dialogue, consultation, and co-ownership of everything that you will go through, that you have gone through. Kasi lahat tayo part of one community.
Well, why do you think, for so long kasi you have been advocating safe sports policy, but until now, wala pa rin mga schools na nakikinig sa'yo to adopt the policy that you are proposing?
Right, although bago lang yung policy, we have our own for our organizations. Pero ngayon ko lang nilabas sa public yung aking proposed policy. And again, I'm advocating every time I talk, like in this forum, thank you. Seminars, vlogs, we're promoting the why of sport and safe sport. So, hindi ako mapapagod advocating for the safe environment, safe sports environment.
Are you in talks already, Attorney, with any lawmaker? Do you have a champion in Congress in order to advocate this safe sports policy?
Yes, I've sent my proposed policy to some members of the Senate and some members of the House, to the Philippine Sports Commission, to the Games and Amusement Board. So I've sent it to some lawyers na part of athletic associations, local government units as well. So
Kamusta naman yung response, Attorney?
let's have a seminar, pag-usapan
It's gonna be a long
natin.
discussion, yeah.
Long discussion, but again, immediate, urgent.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing all your insights with us. That was sports law professor, Attorney Al Agra.
Thank you.
Don't go away because we still have more matters to discuss right after this quick break. Keep it here on One News.
Good morning. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. As electricity prices remain a concern for many Filipino households, one question continues to come up: what is driving higher power bills? The Energy Regulatory Commission explained that electricity rates are affected by several factors, including fuel prices, power supply and demand, and the exchange rate. The agency clarified that not all charges on electricity bills are directly set by the ERC, as costs come from different parts of the power industry. The ERC said it continues to implement measures to help consumers while pursuing long-term solutions, including more renewable energy projects, stronger competition in the power sector, and a more reliable electricity supply.
For more on the factors behind rising electricity costs and the measures being taken to help consumers, we speak with Attorney Maria Corazon Hines, Director of the Legal Service of the Energy Regulatory Commission, o ERC. Good morning, Attorney. Welcome to Morning Matters.
Good morning to everyone.
So I guess the first question here is, what are we paying for in our electricity bill? Where does each charge go? Can you give us a rundown of the things that, kasi sometimes when you look at the bill itself, you don't understand. There's others, there's miscellaneous, diba?
Yeah. Well, basically, the components of your electric bill comes from, first of all, the costs attendant to producing electricity itself, like generation of electricity, transmission of electricity, distribution and supply of electricity. And then there are also the other impositions by law, like for example, value-added taxes, and then the subsidies and the discounts. So that's basically the general classification of the costs. So if you would look at the different costs, the only part of the bill that goes to or remains with the distribution utilities would be what we call the DSM, the distribution, supply, and metering charges. Everything else are what we call pass-through, meaning they collect, but they remit these collections to the concerned entities like the GenCos, transmission, to the government.
Okay.
Pero, Attorney, a lot of consumers now are feeling that electricity prices are becoming unpredictable. They get shocked when they see their bills. Minsan umaabot ng 20,000 for a normal household or even for a condo unit, diba? But, Attorney, what is the biggest factor driving the higher prices this year?
Okay. If you would look at the percentage share of each of the costs, the generation charge accounts for more than 50. Yung tansya nga namin, it really depends on the actual costs, but it ranges between 50 to 70% of the total bill of the consumer. So all the rest, lumalaro siya ng mga 30 and above, but definitely generation charge itself accounts for more than a majority of the total bill.
Okay, but how does our dependency on fossil fuels affect this? And what are the alternatives also?
Okay. For fossil fuels kasi, we do not have the fuel themselves. So, we import. So, bumibili tayo ng, let's say, for example, coal or oil. So, dependent masyado yung fuel costs doon sa presyo sa merkado ng mga imported fuels. So, kung tumataas siya, syempre, tumataas din yung generation cost natin. And since we pay in dollars, pag bumaba din nagde-devalue din yung ating peso, nagde-depreciate, then it also increases the cost kasi mas maraming piso ang kailangan natin para bumili ng $1 pag binayaran na natin yung mga fuel na yun.
Well, I was wondering, the ERC has approved several rate increases, di ba? Yung electric cooperatives and distribution utilities. I was wondering, ano po ba yung parang naging formula natin to be able to come up with the staggered rate para sa mga consumers? Is this a one-time relief for the consumer or this is going to be the standard operating procedure?
Okay. Siguro i-separate natin. Kasi pag sinabi kasi nating retail charge, yun yung different components eh. So there's the generation charge. Like yung mga generation charge, ito yung mga rates na inaaprubahan namin through power supply agreements, blended in with the costs na binibili nilang power sa WESM. Meron din namang yung distribution, supply, and metering charges. Ito yung siniset namin pag may reset, kagaya ng ginagawa namin sa Meralco. So, that basically is fixed until the next reset.
Okay.
So, ganun yung so yung DSM hindi yan nagbabago, but it's the generation charge that
Na
is
medyo
volatile.
volatile,
Yun yung gumagalaw.
Variable siya.
May gumagalaw kasi ang naka-embed, marami kasing costs din na naka-embed dun mismo dun sa generation charge. You have the capital recovery fee, the ONA, operations and maintenance, and then of course yung fuel cost. So, yung dalawa, yung CRF at saka yung O&M, nag-fix na namin yon. Pero yung fuel cost, yun yung variable. So, yun yung nagbabago-bago buwan-buwan. And then, kung bumibili sila sa WESM, kasi hindi naman fully contracted yung demand ng isang distribution utility, and kung malaki yung share of the WESM purchases on the overall, kung kunwari, ang total demand ng isang distribution utility would be, let's say, 100 megawatts. Pero ang contracted lang niya is 80. So, yung 20 megawatts na yon, bibili niya yun sa WESM para mapunan yung buong demand for the consumers, para walang brownout.
Is it different per region? May variability ba?
Yes. Kasi depende kasi kung ano yung demand and supply scenario ng distribution utility. Meron yung malaki yung share ng binibili nila sa WESM kasi hindi fully contracted yung demand ng distribution utility na yon. Meron naman yung kukonti lang. Like for example, dito sa Meralco franchise area, less than 10% yung binibili nila sa WESM. Meron naman yung mga ibang mga distribution utilities like electric cooperatives, they source more than 30% and even higher from the WESM. Kaya kung sumipa at tumaas yung presyo sa WESM, talagang hihilain yung blended rate for the generation charge.
Attorney, are there limits to the charges that can be passed on to consumers? And pagdating sa bill, meron bang portion doon na the ERC can regulate and not regulate as well?
Okay. Yung mga rates sa what we call captive customers, that's us, purely mga residential customers mostly, regulated namin yan. So, we approve the basic generation charges, transmission, distribution, and maski yung variability, yung volatility of the WESM prices, meron kaming confirmation process at the end of 3 years. So, meron kaming over and under recoveries na tinitignan and kino-confirm every 3 years. So, yung 3 years, well, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So, it's a cycle. So, pag nag-confirm kami, tinitignan namin kung tama ba yung ipinasa na fuel cost, yung total generation charges, among others, doon sa mga consumers. So, kung sumobra yung nai-charge, then doon nagkakaroon ko minsan ng refund. Kung nagkukulang naman, yun yung nagko-collect from the customers.
Which leads me to my next question. Paano nyo masisiguro na yung distributors are not overcharging? Anong mechanism meron ng ERC? Because that's your job to regulate the energy ng mga tao natin dito, di ba? But how do you specifically see that or oversee yung increase and to make sure that the distributors are not overcharging consumers?
May mga reporting requirements kasi sila sinasubmit sa amin monthly. And then, over time, kaya nga, meron silang at the end of the 3-year period, magpa-file sila ng confirmation of their over and under recoveries. Then, doon namin talaga isa-isahin na ito bang mga ipinasa nila at this point in time is the correct generation charge or the correct pass-through charges for the time. Kaya kung makikita namin, overall, for the 3 years is merong total na over-recovery, then we require them to refund. Kung kulang naman, then that's time na kami nang collect. Siguro ang pinatutunguhan nyo ngayon, yung kagaya ngayon, may mga nagre-request kasi for a staggered payment, for staggered collection of the generation costs at present. So, a few months before, if I'm not mistaken, naglabas kami ng advisory to the distribution utilities that before they can implement, lalo na pag nakita nila that the generation charge will be more than 1 peso from the previous, then submit muna din sa amin, tingnan muna namin so that we can cushion the impact kasi malaki pag 1 peso yung considering the percentage share of the generation cost on the overall. So, yun, may mga requests sila for staggered collection of the generation charges for one particular month. So, may mga, sila naman mismo yung nagre-request na for staggered collection from the customers.
What do consumers need to look out for? Kunyari, like, bakit ganito kataas yung bill ko? Everyday 3 hours lang naka-on yung aircon or minsan naka-electric fan lang ako buong gabi. What are the things na kailangan pansinin? Yung hindi na tama, yung irregular na, or things that they need to report?
Okay. Well, in terms of consumption, dapat yung ating mga consumers din aware that they are na hindi naman din sumusobra or talagang may ways din na kailangan magtipid. Like for example, kung wala namang gumagamit na ng aircon, patay na yung aircon o kaya huwag hayaan yung mga refrigerator na nakabukas. Kasi may mga sometimes mga habits tayo na pag kukuha ka ng tubig, di ba? Bubuksan mo yung ref. Nakabukas lang. Tapos kukuha ka ng tubig, lagyan ng baso.
Huwag kayong bukas ang ref, pataas yung kuryente.
Yes, that affects yung kasi yung mga cooling devices, they need to reach a certain temperature. So kung exposed siya sa mainit, so tatakbo pa rin yung motor for the cooling devices until nila. So kung laging bukas 'yon, talagang mahihirapan na yung either your air conditioning or yung refrigerator para makuha yung desired temperature niya.
And even yung AC, di ba dapat naka 21 degrees pa? 20...
Dry mode.
Oo,
May mga ganon.
Yung mga appliances, dapat hinuhugot din yung plug pag hindi naman ginagamit. Those are ways to save.
Yes, there are ways to save. Yun. Tapos kailangan yung mga kwarto dapat walang sisingawan ng mga sisingawan ng mga butas-butas.
Lalabas
kasi
yung
yun yung mga
Sara niyo yung window, lalabas yung aircon.
Papasok yung warm air to the room. Yun yung kaya titignan talaga malaking bagay yung walang mga cracks sa mga walls where warm air can pass through and makaka-apekto sa temperature. So talagang energy conservation din talaga yung pwede nating magawa.
Oo, kasi attorney, marami ng mga Pilipino na umaaray dito sa pagbayad ng mahal na kuryente. But let's talk about this National Lifeline Discount Program or yung inyong Lifeline Rate Program. Sino po ba ang makakapag-qualify dyan? And do you have plans to expand this program para naman po more low-income households will also benefit from this?
Okay. Well, the history of the Lifeline subsidy started when EPIR was passed in 2001. So, yung original na structure of who would be entitled to the discount was based on consumption. Kaya lang, ang nangyari doon naman, pag based on consumption, whether you are capable of paying or not, makaka-avail ka basta yung threshold mo ay hindi mo ma-breach. So, noong 2021, nag-change yung policy ng government na, sige, sa mga 4Ps and marginalized end users na lang yung magiging entitled. And recently, naglabas kami ng bagong threshold. So, we have set it at 50 kilowatt hours. Yung mga entitled to the full discount. So, yung first is, dapat marginalized end user ka or member ka ng 4Ps, and then your consumption should not exceed 50 kilowatt hours. Pag nag-exceed ka ng 50 kilowatt hours, then hindi ka na may entitled to the full lifeline discount.
Ako naman, attorney, my concern here is our supply. No, and law of supply and
Yeah.
demand during the summer season, talaga ang daming gumagamit ng kuryente natin ngayon. And we've seen a lot of yellow alerts and tight supply, especially in Visayas,
Yes.
no, particularly in that area. So how are we in terms of supply here in Metro Manila, in other areas of the country?
Okay. Dito sa Luzon, well, except for the episode on the transmission issue and then nagkaroon ng mga forced outages, so far for Luzon, normal naman. Pag sinabi nating normal, there is sufficient amount of supply of electricity for both the demand and the reserves. Doon kasi sa sa Visayas, lagi silang yellow alert, meaning meron pa rin silang tama pa rin yung supply, kaya lang konti na lang yung reserve. So another outage might lead them now to a red alert. Magkakaroon na ng rotational brownouts. So since kukonti lang yung may mga what would be the proper term na andon, there is limited supply, for lack of a better term, like there's limited supply in the Visayas. Still sufficient
So how do we
to meet
increase the
naman.
supply there?
Ang kailangan talaga ng ng additional plants to augment yung mga plant. And then there's also
Problema yung mga
din ng
plants natin, may
transmission.
mga outages.
Yes. yan sa Visayas kasi may mga naka-outage, meron din yung mga derated. Yung mga derated, yung hindi sila tumatakbo in full capacity. So, nagkasabay-sabay doon sa sa Visayas. And then there's also the variability nung mga solar. Actually, malaking bagay yung mga solar natin, yung mga solar plants natin kasi they are the ones augmenting yung supply ng electricity pag may araw hanggang Kapag nakikita nyo before, during the red and yellow alerts, doon nag-dip yung supply nung medyo konti na lang yung production for the solar plants. So pakikita natin 3 p.m. until the late evening. And then nagkakaroon din ng peak ng late evening early evening, kaya yun yung kailangang dagdagan pa ng supply to augment yung unavailability na of the solar plants.
Actually, Attorney, sinabi ng DOE na their focus is really to hasten also the completion of all these solar power plants para nga makapag-augment siya. But kamusta na po ba yung progress nitong mga solar power plants? Are they contributing significantly already to the grid?
Yes. Nga sila doon sa review na ginawa namin during the red and yellow alerts, yun nga yung isang nakita namin. It was very apparent that the solar plants was really helping to maintain yung supply. Kaya nga yung mga red and yellow alerts natin towards the afternoon na. You can just imagine kung nagkaroon tayo ng mga brownouts, mga 11, 12 in the morning, hindi kainitan na yun. At least mga 3 o'clock, mainit pa din. But yun yung naging effect talaga. So there has to be other types of plants na kailangang magpuno yung nawala ng capacity na binibigay ng Kaya nga ang nagiging advocacy ngayon would be the battery storage plants.
In terms of the current infrastructure that we have, what are the ways that you have to maintain, or what are the improvements that need to be made?
Okay. Well, first of all, you need both supply and then the highway. So meaning you have to have the generation plants, and then there has to be sufficient transmission lines as well. Kasi kahit na meron kang supply, kung wala namang dadaluyan yun, hindi rin So magkaakibat yan. So currently, we will be embarking on the NGCP reset. They have actually applied for the reset, and we will be starting the hearings next month kasi may mga legal requirements pa that needs to be done before we can actually start. But we have already set the hearings for the NGCP reset. So pag may NGCP reset, meaning they can already apply for submission rates and approval of the capital expenditure projects that they need to rehabilitate, augment, or to connect upcoming generation plans.
Well, Attorney, very quickly na lang before we let you go. Of course, we mentioned about plant outages kanina, no? So, ano po bang ginagawa ngayon ng ERC? 'Di ba? Ano po ba ang epekto ng plant outages sa electricity bill natin mga consumers, 'di ba? Kasi at some point as a consumer, you will think na hindi ko naman kasalanan nag-outage yung mga plant ninyo, bakit niyo ibibigay yung burden sa aming mga consumer?
Okay. Well, it's more directly related kasi sa mga Western purchases eh. Kasi kung masyadong mataas yung percentage share of the Western purchases on the overall supply needed for the distribution utility, then mataas, hihilain niya yun pataas eh, yung presyo. Kasi pag mababa yung supply, mataas ang demand, talagang yung presyo naman yung akit. That's your law of supply and demand. So pag mataas ang supply, konti lang yung demand, mababa yung mababa yung presyo.
Yun. We have learned a lot from you, Attorney. Thank you for taking this interview. Thank you for your time, Attorney Maria Corazon Hines, Director of the Legal Service of the ERC. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank
Thank you.
Now, don't go away. Morning Matters will be back after a short break.
Good morning and welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. And at this point, let's get some updates from the Senate following the impeachment pretrial conference last week. Our mobile journalist Marymon Reyes now joins us live on the ground. Marymon, what can we expect from the Senate today?
Pauline, ladies, good morning. Ngayong araw, we are anticipating yung pag-release na ng pretrial order. However, according to impeachment clerk of court, Secretary Ray Bantug, hindi pa agad-agad ito ma-disclose sa amin, pero bibigyan muna ng kopya nito yung both the House Prosecution Panel and the defense team of Vice President Sara Duterte. After the receipt of the pretrial order, they are given 3 days to also file their comment, and that will begin tomorrow, Tuesday, and hopefully until Thursday. Kaya yung timeline so far, hindi na mabago. July 6 is still the target date of the start of the impeachment trial. And ang ginagawa rin nila ngayon, yung part of the preparations, ay yung pag-check Sa session hall, yung rooms na gagamitin, yung audio system para lang masiguro na smooth flowing yung pagsisimula nitong proceeding. So far ang schedule, starting July 6 hanggang SONA, kasi ang tinitingnan na dito yung pag-start na ng regular session again. So kailangan din nilang i-manage yung time is Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, 2 p.m. hanggang magsawa sila. Yan ang schedule so far. And ang sinabi rin ni Secretary Bantug, open to the public ang impeachment trial proceedings. Ang kailangan nga lang dito kasi 370 yung seats sa loob ng session hall, 340, tapos 30 seats ang nasa VIP box. So for walk-ins, kailangan pa rin nilang mag-register doon sa visitors management system ng Senado. And part of the seats din, i-allocate din sa mga iimbitahan ng prosecution, ng defense. So yun yung ilan sa mga preparations na inaasikaso nila as of this time. Ladies.
All right. Thank you very much for that report. That was mobile journalist Mary Mon Reyes.
Now at this point, let's check the latest from the House of Representatives. We have our mobile journalist, Amy Atienza. Amy.
Yes, good morning, Angela, ladies. Dito naman sa panig ng House of Representatives, actually, nag-anticipate tayo na magkakaroon ng press conference later on today kasama si ML Party List Laila De Lima at ML Party List Representative Laila De Lima at si Akbayan Party List Representative Chel Jokno na sila namang House prosecutors. Pero konting recap lang din doon sa nangyaring pre-trial brief pagdating nga sa panig naman ng Kamara. Doon sa natapos na pre-trial conference no, nakita na natin yung listahan mismo ng House prosecutors ng kanilang common pati reserve witnesses. Doon sa common witnesses, meron silang 51 na naitala at kasama nga dyan si Abe Andres na siya umanong sinapak ni Vice President Sara Duterte sa isang demolition operation sa Davao City noong 2011. Noong tinanong din namin yung reason behind this, makikita lang din daw at magiging beneficial daw itong si Andres para nga daw makita yung pattern of behavior ni Vice President Sara Duterte from years back up until this year kung saan nga masasabi at nakapaloob doon sa article of impeachment ng public prosecutors laban kay VP Sara na meron ngang grave threat na ibinigay si VP Sara laban kay Pangulong Bongbong Marcos. Bukod pa dyan, nakita rin natin sa listahan ng witness si Mary Grace Piatos at ang nasabi sa atin ni also House Prosecutor Representative Terry Ridon ay yung non-existence or yung existence si Mary Grace Piatos ay siyang talagang titingnan at aabangan hindi lamang ng Kamara kundi pati na rin mismo ng publiko para nga makita kung totoo nga ba yung mga sinasabi at kung totoo nga bang may natanggap sa confidential funds galing kay Vice President Sara Duterte. Ngayon, ang panawagan naman ng House Prosecution Panel ay buksan na nga yung BIR box na hanggang ngayon daw at nung natapos nga daw yung pre-trial conference ay hindi pa nga daw namamarkahan. So yun yung tuloy-tuloy nilang panawagan pagdating nga dito sa impeachment trial ni Vice President Sara Duterte. Kasi ang sinasabi dito ni attorney ni Representative Zia Alonto Adyong na siyang House Prosecution spokesperson ay maaari naman daw kasing isupervise ng defense team kung sakaling sa Senado na at sa trial na mismo bubuksan yung BIR box na naglalaman ng income tax records ni Vice President Sara Duterte. So tuloy-tuloy yung preparasyon mismo ng public prosecutors maging ng private prosecutors na inaasahan nga natin na makikilala pa natin yung ilan sa mga sasali doon sa pool of private lawyers kasama nga yung House of Representatives para nga dito sa impeachment trial ni VP Sara na ina-expect na magsimula sa July 6.
Alright, thank you so much, mobile journalist Amy Atienza.
A quick escape spot in Cavite is getting global recognition. Kawayan Eco Park in General Trias has been named one of Time's World's Greatest Places of 2026, the only Philippine destination on this year's list. Mobile Journal Ray Vicente has the report.
Looking for a quick escape? This eco park in Cavite has been named as one of the greatest places of 2026, offering an international ecotourism sanctuary. Covering a land area of 3 hectares, this Kawayan Eco Park in General Trias, Cavite is the only Philippine destination to earn a spot to the Times World's Greatest Places of 2026.
That actually promotes nature, wellness, and environmental conservation.
So we offer outdoor activities, educational tours, team buildings, programs, and recreational attractions as well. It's a nature-based experience for families, students, and tourists.
This eco park offers a diverse range of activities like horseback riding, boating, fishing, rabbit petting, and a picnic area. But more than a leisure spot, it is also recognized for its bamboo structure that is weather resistant to summer and rainy season.
Bamboo kasi reflects a commitment to sustainability because it is the fastest growing grass and of course environmentally friendly siya. So, etong park kasi namin, it's an open air design and abundant greenery para makahelp siya to keep the area naturally cool during hot weather.
In fact, there are 7 types of bamboo waving, which is the inspiration of the Kawayan name. High-value crops are also planted like papaya, dragon fruit, calamansi, and many more.
This pavilion is made of bamboo. Dalawang bagyo ng dinanan na to. So, with this, we can see that bamboo is also a great structure and matibay siya. We recently planted the rosewood. It's one endemic type of tree, which is the first actually in Calabarzon to be planted.
With this recognition, more local and even international visitors are traveling here merely because it is rich of heritage.
It's very different from anything that's being offered in the city. So that's why that we traveled all the way here to experience the nature and all the greens and fishing. We used natural materials that are native to the Philippines because it is also good for the weather and the tropical climate of our country.
The Kawayan Eco Park is in the process of building more attractions such as glamping and zipline. For now, it is open to visitors at 9 o'clock a.m. from Tuesday to Thursday and 7 o'clock a.m. to 7 o'clock p.m. every Friday to weekend. Kapatid Ray Vicente, we are One News.
And that wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. I'm Angela Lagunsad Castro.
We hope we've given you just the right start to your morning. I'm Cheska Liton-Calao.
Let's make the day matter. I'm Pauline Verzosa, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Kapatid, we are One News.
All sides,
all the time.